right, guys. Hey, thanks for joining me this morning. Been a busy couple weeks. We started fencing and started harvest, and still trying to keep some customers happy in the shop. And so you're spread paper thin every day. But we did get a good start on soybean harvest, and got a couple hundred acres done. And the tracks worked phenomenal. Work absolutely phenomenal, like any track would. You know, it floats better through the field. And these tracks I really like because they're not rigid to the frame. You got this heavy pivot here and another one inside there. You got that rubber block down there. So the track frame to the combine rides on that rubber block. So in the field, you know, we're bone dry. We haven't seen anything of significant moisture for 40, almost 50 days. And we went through all of pod fill on the soybeans with not a drop of rain. Some fields, you know, what a weird year. A lot of the beans spent their first month struggling in wet, and then it turned dry. And so, you know, some fields handled it better than others. And there's fields that are a zero. They were planted, but there's a zero. And then there's guys getting 8 and 10 bushel, and there's guys getting 20 bushel, 30 bushel, 40 bushel. And there's even some guys getting 50 and 60 bushel. And so it just, luck of the draw this year, you know, kind of crazy. But so beans are going good. Like I said, got the first couple hundred acres through, first tank of fuel through. The tracks work great in the field. They're just beautiful in the field. They bridge gaps. They ride nice. You can see here's a sharp turn with the combine. They don't really tear up the fields very much. On the road, it's 16 miles an hour on the road. There's a little bit of vibration and chatter in the cab, but nothing that you can't live with. A little annoying after, you know, on a 10-mile move. If all I did was road running and never had to fight mud, I'd leave the wheels on. I would have just bought better tires. But, you know, like last year we had a foot of rain at this time. And so there's been a lot of falls that we're fighting mud. And so I'm set up for that now. And so, no, it's been nothing but a positive experience with the tracks. Now my left-hand rotor went out, so we're going to repair that rotor today. And I've never done the left-hand side. So we're going to take that sheet metal off, drop that gearbox. Hopefully I can move it to the left enough to unhook the coupler, the Lovejoy coupler. Hopefully I can move it and get rid of that coupler. And then with all that sheet metal out, then I just go up in the grain tank, go through the floor of the grain tank, and there's 3 bolts, I believe, up front. I'm not quite sure. We'll find out. But take some bolts out on the front bearing housing, and then come in with the Massey, and I got my pallet forks with. And then we just yank the rotor back till it's way back and sits on this crossbar, and then I set the fork on top and kind of strap the rotor to the fork, and then, you know, kind of manipulate it out of the combine, and we'll set the rotor on the pickup, run home, put the new bearing on, bring it back, and put it back in. And so, and now after a couple hundred acres, I got to refill the fuel tank because that's at 0. Yeah, so by the end of today, then we got to feed. When I take the rotor back for the new bearing, then the wife is going to meet me there, and we got the pastures are, you know, been froze off, and so the grass is getting thin on the pastures, so we got to take a bale to the cows, and then time for the steers to get a new bale, and then the cull cows, or I call them the dry cows. They're not dry, but I just call them dry cows. But we got to get a new bale of them as well. And so, like I said, with any luck, between taking care of chores and everything else, by the end of today, I would like to have that rotor back in and running and full of fuel. And maybe we try a combine in a couple acres. This field itself did not fare so well And what I wonder is, on a normal year or most years, the strip till, when you get an inch of rain, let's say, that strip till allows that water to get away from that seedling. So in essence, you're keeping the seedling high and dry, but it's right above that moist soil. On a year like this, the strip till fields, a couple of them kind of took a hard hit, and a couple of the one no-till field kind of took a little hit because it's a wet field, to where after a foot of rain, we only got 10 inches of top profile, and you get a foot of rain, them plants just struggled forever, and that strip till slot just filled up with water, became the reservoir, until that water could percolate into the clay a little bit. And so them fields just kind of stalled out this spring. Some of the other no-till fields I think are going to do actually pretty dang good. And so it just, you know, it is what it is. But kind of a weird year to get, you know, a whole year's worth of water in your first couple weeks of the season, and then boom, you're done. And so at least that water was into the profile, but I think the lack of sun, the lack of heat, solar activity on the soybeans, the corn really thrived this year, but the beans, I think are going to be a little more variable than the corn. I think the corn is just going to be really good corn everywhere you go. And like I said before, the beans, pretty hit and miss. But enough yapping, let's get on this combine. So at this point, we're in it for 15 minutes. We got all that sheet metal off, and now you can kind of see down the rotor tube. So there's 4 bolts that hold that gearbox on up top. So let's get them off and see if that gives us enough room to unhook that coupler. If not, I don't know what the heck. Oh, we are loose at this end. So our gearbox is loose. There's some dowel pins up here. So you had to pry it down that whisker, and then clunk, it fell out. And so going together might be a little bit of an adventure, but we'll get it. Now we go way up front and crawl in the grain tank and get the front end off. All right, so we're in the grain tank, and here's where you got 10 minutes of, you gotta be kidding me. This is bullcrap. And so it's not that terrible, but there's this flange, and there's 2 bolts that go right here. So we just take 2 bolts, take that plate out, and then them 2 bolts off the front, and this little cover goes in there. And that cover has them tabs, so be ready to catch it. When you take the bolts out, just be ready to catch it. Take a screwdriver to help wiggle it out of position, and we go from there. I believe it is orientated. It'd be interesting to try it, but we just are going to orientate it. Top goes back to top, and because I'm pretty sure it is orientated. It's not perfectly concentric. So there we go. Now we're ready to pull that rotor, I believe. Not a great shot, but I'm hooked up with a little strap, and then we just give it a little tugging and see if we can't get it to move, and then there she come. There she come. And just got to cooperate and go by feel. There's veins in there, so we got to be, you can't just, yank it. You got to use a little common sense. But I'll go up there and see if I can't help it by hand, and kind of between me and the tractor, we'll get it to work our way back. We got it this far, not most of the way out, so I'm going to unstrap, and then I'm going to set my fork up here, and then we're going to tie to the fork so then I can control the rotor, the balance of it. This gearbox, you gotta watch it. You got the weight of a small person in this gearbox, so just be careful. It's tied to me, so now I'm just backing up, watching and feeling, and trying to guess what's going on. Oh, the strap slipped a little up front, but that's okay. We still got it. If I keep tipping back, eventually the rotor's gonna lift up. There we go. We're out of the combine, and now we are remember, we're only moving bolts and steel. If things fall, you know, you don't want nothing to fall, but worst case scenario, iron can hit the ground. People can't hit the ground, and people can't be hit by iron. That's just my philosophy of life. And there we go. And in both scenarios, nobody got hurt. So let's go look at that bearing and lift that mammoth of a gearbox off. I'll tell you one thing, the Germans build stuff right, and they make it very repairable and heavy duty, but sometimes you just got to figure out how they did it. And so let's get the bed of the truck cleaned off of all our tools, get that rotor on there, and get it to the farm where the bearing just arrived, and get the new bearing on, and the cow's fed, and blah blah blah. Well, there we go. The bearing, this nose sits here, so there's a snap ring. Got the bearing in. We'll got the shaft cleaned up, tap him on a little bit, and take the bolt and suck him in, and then we're ready for install. Well, there we go. We're back on the loader. Had some delays, other stuff at the farm to do, so it's a little late. But let's get back out here and see if we can't get this thing maybe set in, obviously. And I don't know if we can go in the grain tank and get this nose put in place tonight or not. But let's see how far we can get. Well, there we go. The cover plate's back on. There ain't much to show you there. I got to close that inspection door yet. It's just a matter of you've got zero room to get your hand in here, and that bullnose piece that the bearing is in is what these two bolts are going into, and then this plate, you know, is obviously smushing that bullnose between this into this structure. And it's just a matter of have that sucker as close to a line as you can. There's a grease hole at the bottom, and then wiggle that rotor into place. And then I got a small punch that I use down there. I can kind of get it somewhat orientated, and then with the cap, you know, kind of getting the cap locked in place with a small punch, or even two little it might even have, if a guy had a couple of these bolts cut off, you could at least get this cap on and maybe manipulate it. But whatever works for you. But we're back together here. Let's button a couple things up and get out of here. So the rotor's really heavy. I don't know how the professionals do it, but I slid my come along. I lifted up the gearbox here, slid my come along way down, and then took my strap off, and then I could pull down on the gearbox and slide the rotor forward to get that nose piece in place. Now we just gotta pull this out and pull him out, take the strap off, rotate the gearbox, lift it into place, bolt it up, and we're almost home. Well, there we go. I cracked them loose just to give that shaft that couple degrees down, and with the strap saddle in here, you kind of come up into it, or you kind of come back into it, whatever. But there's these little dowel pins right there, that silver dowel pin. There's one on each lug. So you're not going to pull this up with the ratchet strap. You want to get it in line, lull, get your bolts in, and then let the bolts pull it up, because they're going to help keep everything square and in line, and then bring her home. So at this point, we should be able to pull that strap off and tighten them 8 bolts up, get our sheet metal on, and then grease it. Well, I greased some 50 pumps and then started the thrashing and greased some another 25 pumps while that bearing's turning, to really get a lot of grease into that bearing to start with. And so there they are, flim-flamming around. And so there you go. Big thing is look at where they sit now, and then you'll know it when that bearing goes out, because they'll be at a much different position. I'll shut that off while we keep pumping fuel. I get this tailboard lifted up. The chopper automatically shuts off, so when you want to drop straw, you pull this pin, the tailboard drops, this door drops, and now you're dropping straw. And when I want to do like soybeans or corn, I'll pull this pin, lift the tailboard back up, that door shuts, and the chopper will then turn back on, and then you're back to chopping. Well, how about we actually get some combining footage here. Going a little bit slow. Going a little bit slow, being careful, watching for rock. The stalks of the beans are still tough, believe it or not. They've been froze a couple times, and they're still a little on the tough side, so they're harder to cut. So you slow down to 3.8 miles an hour and just crawl along and let it do its good job. Overall, the beans on this field I'm fairly happy with, or okay. How about I'm okay with? The beans we're combining are not going to cause our yield drag. It's the beans that are non-existent that you planted that are going to cause the yield drag. But overall, not too bad. We'll have better fields, we'll have worse fields. But yeah, I get 2 rounds and then I'm full. So I'm thinking 4 hoppers, you know, and I got the grain cart full. Yeah, grass coming. I don't know what the heck. There's some barnyard grass. Haven't seen barnyard grass in a bean field in a long time. And this year in some of these spots, you know, here the beans were wet all year. So where it got grassy, the beans did very poor, not because of the grass, just because of the soil profile in the year. The grass just took an opportunity of that, you know, here there's no beans. Yep, wherever it's got kind of weedy, for the most part, the beans weren't doing that good to begin with. So, yeah, whatever. It is what it is at this time of year. Here's what I like, is the field's a little rough. I literally need just a splash to top off the grain cart for the next semi. And we just go, you know, wide open, second gear, 7 miles an hour, and smooth as can be across the row crop cultivated ground. You still get some bounce through the tracks a little bit, and then your rear tires. Excuse me, but yeah, we're gonna grab just open this field up. All I need is a partial hopper and to get in that cart, and then we'll come back down here, and then we knock this little piece out. It's 10 acres. We'll wipe that out quick and go across the road and get started on that 40. Well, good morning. Look at that beautiful sunrise. So let's end this video here. Grain cart's full. We were fixing the combine just on the other side of these trees on that field there, up a quarter mile. Came down here last night. Truck showed up. We were able to empty everything, get that field finished. Came down here and got this field. We're not done, but the yield. What I have to do a summary of this year, because I almost think these beans were just drought. Believe it or not, drought. Little tiny pods, little tiny beans. They're exactly just drought stressed beans. Another bad bean year. I gotta figure something out, but the stand looks beautiful. They're other than the spots that drowned out, like their little green patch right here.